My name's Ed Whitelaw. I'm from the Real Ideas organisation based here in Plymouth and across the southwest, and a little further afield at times. I have the great pleasure of being your co-chair and co-host with my colleague Frances. Frances, who are you? Where are you?
Hello, I'm here. I'm at Frances Northrop and I'm just up the road from Plymouth in Totnes, and I work for the New Economics Foundation, where I'm the Associate Fellow leading on our local economies work.
Fantastic. Frances, more of a welcome from you, I think.
Welcome to this second session of the State of Us, and this is kindly supported by Power to Change. And this one, last week we explored the state of work, and now we're looking at the state of spaces and places. So how people are building community power and economic democracy through practical examples of generative land uses in neighbourhoods across the UK. And I'm really delighted to welcome our speakers today. We have Niroshan Sudasan from Butetown Matters in Cardiff, Victoria Alvarez and Viviana Da Silva from the Latin Village in Tottenham, Hannah Sloggett from Nudge Community Builders, and Jacqueline Slade from Stiltskin Arts and the Soapbox Theatre, both of whom we've got the pleasure of working with through our Power to Change Empowering Places programme here in Plymouth.
Fantastic, thank you to our speakers. Thank you, Frances. So before we get on, we head on too quickly, a few little bit of sort of recommendations, etiquette and instructions and things like that. We've popped the agenda in the chat that you'll be able to see. Last week managed to keep to time pretty effectively, so let's going to try and do that again, which is really great. We are recording today's event, essentially for an event record and a post-event publication. We'll also be recording in the breakout rooms. There is, of course, a hashtag for the event. Do make use of it. The State of Us 2021. That's also in the chat, and it'd be great to amplify what we are doing. All our attendees, you'll notice that you are on mute for now. You will be, of course, unmuted for the breakout rooms because we really, really want to hear from you. And of course, please do ask questions of our speakers. You can do this while they're speaking by dropping them into the chat, and we will put them to the speakers when we can. We'll aim to have a quick moment of clarification questions after our speakers have all presented. So please do put your questions in the chat. And there will be a time to discuss ideas and questions in the breakout rooms, which we can then put to our speakers more fully in the Q&A discussion later on. However, I will ask, as per usual, to try and keep questions concise, i.e. one clear question, and try to avoid wider comments. Our lovely speakers, you can obviously have the power to unmute yourselves, but please only do this when you're presenting or addressing a specific question. As Frances mentions, today is the second instalment of our four-part State of Us conference series. Last week, we managed to kick off with a state of work, where we had four fantastic, really great speakers exploring how both within and beyond the workplace, people are creating power and economic democracy through cooperatives, through social enterprises, and even through new unions. And a lot of that also spoke to some of the key new municipalist ideas that this event is inspired by, bringing democracy and power closer to people's everyday lives, and how often, if we want to make change, we at times need to work within the state, sometimes go beyond the state, and sometimes even work against it. Today we're going to take that a bit further with the state by looking at the state of spaces and places. How can we create power for communities and economic democracy in our public spaces, in our high streets, in our green spaces, in our neighbourhoods, and in our communities? Again, this speaks to a number of the key new municipalist ideas, the idea of the politics of proximity, everyday democracy, people having a more genuine say in the developments that go on in their communities. So important when so many of our communities feel powerless in the face of often large corporate-driven regeneration and gentrification that effectively so often drives people out of their neighbourhoods. Also, the idea of dual power, and I love a bit of dual power. If we're to create power and democracy in our communities, we need to learn to, at times, work within to occupy the state. And at times we need to DIY it and go beyond the state. And at times we need to stand and work against the state. All our speakers today will share their experience of how they're making this happen. Another key component of the municipalist basket of ideas is the idea of economic democracy, which is part of what the State of Us is all about. Frances, more practically, what does that look like in our communities?
So I think this idea of municipalism has become sort of attached to local authorities as if that's the municipal power, but actually municipal just means at a local level. And so I think that the question about the new municipalism and economic democracy has to be about how we create an economy local to us that meets our needs, but is also internationally solidaristic. So too often we're told that being involved in the productive uses of land and buildings isn't for us, it's just for the development industry. And I think councils feel that there's no alternative. Obviously, this leads to regeneration for personal profit. It doesn't mean meet local need, and it leads to the banking of land, so that land's seen as a unit of financial value, and buildings are kept empty where there could be life and activity that generates community wealth. So our speakers today can offer a vision of something very different and a way of seeing what's actually possible, which is so great to have them with us. So first I'd like to introduce Niroshan from Butte Town Matters.
Thank you, Francis, and thank you, Ed. Hi, everyone. It's really nice to be here. It was actually meant to be 3 of us, but two of the team couldn't do it. I just want to give a shout out to them anyways. Matt, Muna and Yakub do also the really important work. I just got stuck with presenting today, but it's still really good to be here to talk about the work that we do, and especially give you a bit more background on Butte Town and what it's like living in that community, what the challenges that community faces, and especially how we try and go about making change as young leaders. But before I get into any of that, I just want to show you a video of what Butte Town is like. I think obviously I'm aware because I live in Cardiff, I'm from Cardiff, I meet people there, but I know many of you might not have an idea of what Butte Town is in Cardiff, and what it's like. It's a typical docks area, but with a rich and multicultural history. I'm really proud of where they come from, and I hope this video does justice when it's shown. It was actually filmed for the BBC in 2019 for Black History Month. The presenter is someone we know locally. Their name is Mojana, and they went around speaking to residents and getting the insight into what Butte Town is like. So before I keep on talking, I'll share this video and then come back to talk about how we went about making change. I hope that gave you a really good, it was a really good video. I really enjoyed it when I first saw it. But yeah, I hope it gave a sense of who's in the community, what it's like living there.
To win a sprint medal when she won silver at the 100 meters in Doha. Tonight, she's going.
Apologies, the next video played, so I was just hearing that in my background. But yeah, I hope that video gave you a real sense of background on what Butte Town is like, the history of it, especially with the docks, and how long the communities have been there. But despite that, as Mo touched on, the area still face many challenges around discrimination, inequality, and unemployment are rife in Butte Town, and it still is today. And, you know, when we talk about Cardiff and when we talk about the city, it is a tale of two cities in Cardiff. One compared to the northern side, which is more prosperous and much more developed in terms of its resources, to the southern side, which has some of the most deprived wards in Wales. Almost a third of Cardiff residents experience material deprivation, with a high percentage of children living in workless and low-income households. And despite you know, Cardiff's growth during the last 30 years, the patterns of poverty and inequality emerged a generation ago. There are many disparities comparing the southern arc of the city, where Butte Town is, and includes other communities as well, and the rest of the city. And you know, in addition, this is worsened by this is even worse for ethnic minorities and those working with a long-term disability, who are more vulnerable to long-term unemployment as well. So, you know, communities across Cardiff and Butte Town not only face deprivation in terms of jobs and economics, but environmental deprivation as well, with low quality and a total lack of appropriate housing, job losses across key sectors like the arts, hospitality, and manufacturing. And, you know, the destruction of our cultural heritage and historic buildings and more. You know, Butte Town, if you look at the past 10, 15, 20 years, has been redeveloped quite a bit to attract tourists to the area. There's actually a wall by Bhutan where people call it the Berlin Wall because it separates the bay part to the community part, which looks at the differences of how the city treats the community of Bhutan. You know, and what this means is that there are much less green space, more flats and housing which are unaffordable, more low quality jobs, and, you know, less space for community and public health amenities. It means, what that means is it means less input into decisions, it means low quality housing, it means less accountability for us. And really, it means more money in the pockets of landlords and others, of developers who get the money to run and change the community for what it is, and less space for people to just exist in peace in a clean environment and live in quality communities where, you know, they're proud of what they want to do and they have a say in what happens. And during this pandemic, you know, we had many challenges, especially communities have come together despite really a difficult hardship, but we've seen plans which are being pushed through this period by those in charge, especially the local authority. And, you know, despite everything going on, the people of the city still care deeply and want to protect what we have. So, you know, we during the past year, we've had the challenges of the local authority continuing to carry on this agenda of making sure communities are not heard, you know, our voices are not fully consulted. We've had a really good example in the former paddle steamer cafe, which is a local cafe in Bhutan, which looked at keeping that space as a community facility. You know, we had over 50 individuals, community leaders come together, demanding that the plans for the paddle steamer change. What the local authority planned to do with this community space is that to replace it with social housing. And we know that there is a much need for housing in the local community, but we want that to go hand in hand with local spaces where communities can get together. And, you know, one of those spaces is the paddle steamer. But the local authority obviously didn't agree with that point of view, and we had to mobilize and organize our community leaders to object against it. So how we did that is making sure we got those that are prominent individuals in the community to sign a letter of support demanding that the plans for the paddle steamer are changed. Now, this was led all by Bhutan Matters and their team of young leaders. This was whilst welcoming the promise of more social housing. What we asked for is why a permanent space for the cafe can't be provided. You know, the council has committed to a BAME equality task force. You know, we thought there'll be some leeway into that, looking at how campaigners in Bhutan can make an attempt to save historic institutions with the paddle steamer, with a direct appeal to our council leader. You know, following the Black Lives Matter protests, a local controversy already happened with another plan with the military museum in the Bay, where communities again felt they weren't heard. And they are demanding, you know, what we try to do is make sure we got together in a room, organize and listen communities to what issues are affecting them. What we heard time and time again is that, you know, we got plans towards the end of the consultation period where, you know, decisions have already been made. Developers have had their plans in the latter stages where it's really too late to make any drastic changes. And, you know, communities of Bhutan were wondering how come that's the case. We felt that we were not in that space to challenge these. And, you know, we said we're tired of the communities of Bhutan of being ignored and overlooked. And, you know, when a request that we put forward is not acknowledged, it's impossible not to even view this in the wider context of the city. You know, we know Bhutan has had so much buildings and development in the past few decades, but it happens across the city. You know, we try and make sure the council make sure they have more time to address this as an open space. But what we want to do, you know, we challenge and try and build relationship with those in power. We realize that this approach of making sure that we shout as loud as we can work in mobilizing people, but in reality we need to be in those spaces where decisions are made and those with power where they're having these discussions. When we're not in those spaces is why we continue to see this happen. So what we're trying to do is make sure we made a direct appeal, did a power analysis, looking at who's exactly is in charge of making sure spaces are protected in Bhutan. We found that person, which sometimes is directly linked to the council leader, other times it's involved to people below him who are in the planning committee or in planning offices. And we try to explain and tell them the story of that they have an opportunity to make an engagement, a proper, meaningful engagement with the community, looking at how they can establish a space that welcomes and makes the space more welcoming, having that social housing, making sure that communities are not losing their historic institution. You know, with a long and colorful history, and the paddle has been an important meeting place for long-established Somali and Yemeni communities. You know, it meets the social needs of those that are living there, and, you know, it gives supportive residents from complex backgrounds. That was our message to them, saying this is a community space, whether you think it or not. When we tried to build these relationships and target them, we had lots of 50 community members, 50 community leaders, you know, who represent tens and hundreds of others. What we try to say is, even though your plans is important to the community in terms of housing, what we're saying is you can't take our meaningful institutions away. These institutions are in place to support the wider community and meet their needs. And, you know, that was the message we were trying to get across, of building a relationship and trying to work with us. All we asked at that stage was trying to make sure we built that relationship with the council, so that next time they do something with this, or when they want to offer support, that we're at there from the beginning phase of their planning. You know, we've had positive responses from certain councillors and the council in lots of things, but we still have a long way to go in terms of tackling this. And what we want to see is helping communities challenge the unfair power of developers. So that means giving communities a real voice in the planning process, and make community objections a legally valid reason for rejecting developments. What we've seen is that when we put forward an objection, it's tossed aside as, oh no, it's not going to work out and it doesn't matter. What we want is objectors should have the same right as developers and have that same meaningful voice when it comes to protecting spaces. And you know, we want to give councillors an opportunity. We need to make sure the process is impartial as it can be, and you know, there shouldn't be any party relationships in terms of spaces affected by local communities. Rather, they involve the community from the beginning phase of any development, where we try and engage the young leaders, where we'll mobilize and get people into that room, and officers and councillors can really listen to them, but they have to make a commitment of doing that. You know, we want them to make sure giving communities at least 6 weeks, at least, to submit a view about applications. Sometimes we only get a few days. So our approach is making sure our demands we have enough time to look at the proposal, to digest it and comment on it. You know, and we want to providing a right to reply for petitioners in the planning committee as well. So anytime we did a petition where we had hundreds of signatures, sometimes it was all ignored. But what we've seen work is when we built close relationships with those in power and said, look, these are the names of the petitioners, they tend to respond straight away. But what we're saying is, any petitioner that does want to protect their space, give them that same right in the planning community. And you know, what we finally ask for is giving communities access to advisors and help and support in protecting those spaces, and incorporating their views in their recommendations. You know, one thing we want to see, and Bhutan Matters is all about, is raising the profile and the issues of residents. And you know, we can only do that by building relationships with those in power, the developers, and how we can work together to make sure Bhutan and the Bay is successful for generations to come, and is part of the cohort of Cardiff, where we see the city becoming a global, a major capital city in Europe. But at the same time, we don't want to lose our historic institutions. And we can do that by giving communities a real voice that matters at planning stages, that has direct contact with council leaders, and that, you know, we have that providing a right for communities to object in any way, and that is taken as a valid reason. So, you know, when we campaigned, we obviously raised a lot of media profile, and with that, we have a really close relationship with the councillors. So I think it's important that when we look at changing local communities, we try and build that relationship and direct contact with the council leader and the council as well. So working with the local authority rather against. And I think that's the message that we want to leave with, especially looking at what happened in the past year, where the lessons that we learned is, you know, working and really working together with local authorities, looking at what works, involving the community at each stage of the development means much more successful, and everybody is happy at the end of it, rather than coming at the end of anything that they've decided and not having any community voices. So what we want is to work with institutions so that, you know, communities like Bhutan can be heard for years, and, you know, gives voices to the real people that these spaces affect. Thank you.
Thank you, Nurashan. That was incredibly powerful listening to you talk then. The way that you've built your power is amazing, and just insisting on that transparency and the accountability from people who are elected. There's so much that resonates with what I know Vicky and Viviana are going to talk about now. So I'm really delighted to welcome them to talk about a very specific example, I think, that really kind of highlights everything that you've also said, Nurashan. Thank you.
Yeah, shall we start? Hi.
Yes, sorry, yes.
Okay, my name is Vicky Alvarez. I'm Colombian. I'm here with Viviana, which is third generation, I think, of the market traders. And thank you very much, Nishan, for your presentation, because I think exactly what Francis has said. Sorry, I'm also here with Don Carlos Burgos, which is, you will meet him in a minute. But everything that you say is just like I was living through your experience, the whole process. But I got a few ideas that might be able to help, and then, well. So we, like I say, I'm Vicky Alvarez, I'm Colombian, and this is our story. And this was Pueblito Paisa, Latin Village. This was the idea many years ago in a pocket in London, called Seven Sisters, which is not London. And it was a market that already existed since 1970. It's a building owned by TfL. And then it's a place that is a very dilapidated. It has been neglected, and now it's a dilapidated building, which I will take you through the whole story. But the idea when I started in the market was 20 years ago was this one. It was this. This is more or less where I come from. These are my roots. I'm Paisa. This is a place in Colombia where it's like the whole coffee region, which is pretty much all the architecture. It was from the colonization from the Spanish and the Portuguese. Well, we are not colonized by the Portuguese, but the Spanish. So therefore, all the representation of the balcony. So when I started in the market, the idea was like to try to recreate something that remind us of the villages in Colombia. This like I said, we always wanted to recreate the feeling of being at home. That space, the market allowed our children, or my children, to learn from our experience and to never to get disconnected from the culture and the root that is very important as being migrant. As you can see, I still have so many problems with my English, which is my daughter. She wasn't born here, but she was brought up here, so she speaks perfect. So I'm really sorry if I make mistakes, but that one of the things that it was difficult to overcome, but I managed to do it. So I'm sure I will be able to give a clear message of what I wanted to say. And then this is, like I say, this has helped us to maintain the roots with the past, the present, and the future, and the community. Do you want to pass it to the next one, baby? Okay, I'm going to do a presentation, and then I will tell you everything about it, the market. So when we started in the market many years ago, we just we have this kind of vision. This is the market. This is the place where it is right now. So the first picture was our first community plan, you know, and there's the second and the third community plan. So 20 years ago, when I started in the market, I heard that the place was going to be demolished, and 16, 17 years ago, we decided with Don Carlos Burgos, which is here today, that we're going to fight back. As you can see, when Nisha talk about how inequality is. I can tell you, you have no idea how difficult it has been for the Latino community, which is most of us are only recognized for doing cleaning jobs and difficult jobs and then in this kind of field. So low paid workers and of course not being recognized at all. So start to fighting first from yourself, that you say, I do have rights and I contribute to the economy. Why don't we create a space that is not going to be only beneficially for my community, but for the wider community, to integrate with the wider community. So having all these kind of ideas, trying to put these ideas together, it was really hard because of course the first barrier was the language, and the second barrier was perhaps from ourselves, that I believe the community sometimes, most of the time, we live in a bubble because we are it's a frightened community. The other thing you shouldn't ask, you should be grateful because we are allowed to be here. And this kind of a stigma, it was very complicated to fight from, ourselves, to be able to empower ourselves, to empower the community. And especially because this market was more about women's single moms. I was a single mom when I started, and that was the reason. So, and then we formed this kind of coalition, not only with the traders, with different traders from outside the market and the whole neighborhood. And that gives the what it is today, a community plan. We have planning permission. The first planning permission was granted on 27, the second one on 2014, and the third one was done on the 2020, which is only we had on 2021. When you talk about how institution or the council has been extremely difficult, yes, that's the job of the council, to make the life of the community miserable. And it has been, they have made the life of our community a completely misery for the past 16 years. Like I say, this campaign has been going on for 16 years, and we're here to stay, and we're here to demonstrate that the communities matter, and then the power lay in the community, despite whatever they wanted to say to you. And if you think sitting with them and be able to work with them, that will work, they might say yes to you, but behind your back, they're going to do something different. So you have to be, everybody have to be very, aware of the situation, because that more or less is what happened. I don't understand when they are to represent our needs. The only thing that they do is they represent the developers, that they come to destroy our community, because our communities are small ecosystems, that they are very fragile, but it's up to and down to us to make sure that very thriving and very strong, and and then they're here to stay. Next one, Billy. This, okay, so the market, I'm afraid, or the Latin village, or the Pueblito Paisa, has been closed before COVID, has been closed for 12, 13 months, almost 14 months now, has been closed because, of course, the developer just brought a person who destroyed the market. All the people who's been managing the market has been there milking this community and these spaces. And if you can see, now it's empty. At the moment it's empty because it has been dilapidated on purpose. And this is the job sometimes of the authorities. What they do is allow this beautiful iconic building, because it's a very beautiful iconic building with so much architectural merit, which it should be respected and preserved, but instead of that has been dilapidated, as you can see in the photographs that you can see it's been empty for like more than a year. And now you can see with the traders, I'm being here trying to organize, and for the traders to carry on having this sense of belonging, and what we're going to do this, and preparing for what we're going to do dress. And at the bottom is like we always fighting back. So, and this is the message: communities always have to fight back. And this is the resistance through the years. We have been going to court many times. This is with the the royal the crowd, how do you call the crowd of justice, in the Strand. So we were there. We always do we protest, peaceful protest. And then it has been extremely difficult, but it has proved that it does work. And then we, like I say, we went to a judicial review when some of you, or you talk about it in the past, that you've been ignored, that the lack of consultation. I think the advice here is like you can bring a judicial review. Of course, it's expensive, but it's way to do it. We have that doing a lot of fundraising, a lot of crowd justice campaign, signing. The Latin Bill is been here to help you, because I suppose this platform is going to help us to be able to make new allies and to help us, and then to strengthen the powers of community in general, right? So by bringing a judicial review, the authorities have no choice but to listen to you. But we have we always have been a very sympathetic pool of solicitors who has been fighting for the right of communities, because as you know, and you always say, communities are normally disprotected. With the lack of resources are absolutely unbelievable. The only thing we always wanted to do what is right for the communities, because being born in the community, being part of the community, we are the ones who recognize what the community needs. Vivi, the next one. Okay, now this is after COVID. I have identified that when we put here, as you can see on your right, or anyway, what it says community hub, this part is this is how the building look at the back. This is what we propose on the left hand side. This is what proposed that how we can bring this community back into use. Sorry, this space back into use. And then it will be a starter for small businesses. After COVID, of course, as we all know, the economical climate is extremely difficult, which is in many ways has destroyed community. In other ways, perhaps have strengthened the community. In our case, this has made us wanted to fight even harder. But we realized that we need a community hub. Why? Because a lot of people after COVID have been going through a mental breakdown in many ways. So we need to have this, and we are trying to get this space where exactly the little blue thing it is. We would like to restore that part of the building, and we would like to bring this community hub. It has been almost impossible, because in our history of our campaign, we went to the High Court. We won a judicial review. We lost one, and then the CPO. We lost the appeal of the CPO, but still we are refusing to go away. So we are very stubborn, and we're here to stay. And they're not going to make us go away, because the strength of the community again is lay on the community. So if anyone wanted to check, at the bottom we just put a link for what we are trying to do with this space, a temporary space to be able to help the community recover after COVID. Maybe the next one. And yeah, I know it's a short presentation if you have any question, but I will go into more details. But more or less, I wanted to give you the idea who we are, what we are doing. I got on Carlos as well, who will be able to help me, and Viviana, she's the daughter of one of the traders, which is she's like my daughter. I saw her; she grew up in the market, and then the good thing is bringing different generations together is how you strengthen the power of the community. And then she's helping me with the PowerPoint, because I'm useless with that. And then when it comes to technology, the young generation are the masters on that. Don Carlos, I think I'm going to leave you with to carry on, perhaps expanding a bit more on that. And yeah, and if you have any question, please, I'm very happy to answer that.
Thank you, Vicky. That's just, I mean, how much I've had the absolute pleasure of working with you all over the last couple of years, so you know how much this means to me. But the combination of just the different elements of the ways that you keep kind of pushing in different places, kind of really pushing on the developer and their reputation and the campaign, the legal challenge, and then the actual positivity of the community plan and what the vision is, not only for the existing market, which was incredible and will be again, but just kind of, how that whole community plan will work for the whole of the area is incredibly inspiring. So if other people haven't, we can ask questions obviously at the end, but also if people haven't didn't know about the campaign, it's really, really worth looking up, and please do look at the Space Hive and donate to the Community Hub. She said, shamelessly using my platform to be able to say that. So Hannah, I think perfect to hand over to you, where you can talk about how you're doing that in several different buildings in the same street.
Yeah, so amazing to hear all these amazing stories. So I'm just going to share some pictures of our journey so you get a feel for where we are, and pick up on some of the patterns really that have started to play out as we take on more buildings. So I'm co-director of Nudge Community Builders with Wendy down in Plymouth, and we're focused on this street here, Union Street. It doesn't look like this all the time. This is one day a year, and really where we started. So we closed the street for the first time 11 years ago. And really wanted to find a way to bring people together, to recognise the strengths in our community, and to celebrate an area where a lot of people love living, but it's judged by a lot of different people as well. So we really wanted to sort of shift those perceptions, and it started to lead on, so it's where it all started really. At the time, me and Wendy were volunteers, we both live locally, and it led on to lots of questions about why there were so many empty buildings. So 25% of the buildings along the street were standing empty, and people kept on saying, why don't they do something about it? And we were like, actually, we could do something about this. Gradually over time that happens. So this was our first building, Union Corner, and this is really where we cut our teeth, and we learned a lot of the lessons, and you'll see that play through with our other buildings. So Union Corner was a building that had been standing empty for 25 years. We brought it back into use into a garden on the left, so that building had burnt down. And then the space inside Union Corner is for any local person that wants to try something different. So in normal times, it gets used for all sorts of things, but most recently it's been, through COVID, it's been a really important space for people to come and get food and clothes and sort of urgent support. But what we realised was we quickly had an impact in that area. So we'd already put graphics up, and we'd kind of got to know some of the empty buildings, why they were standing empty, why the landowners weren't doing things with them, and started to kind of unpick really some of the really kind of complex issues that hold the street back. And so we gave ourselves permission, and we talk about this a lot, and you know, we are massive advocates of other people giving themselves permission to start to make change in their local area. So this is what Union Corner looked like in the early days. So you can see we had like this massive wall to sort out, and we'd already started to put some of the graphics up. And there was just red tape after red tape after red tape, and we started to unpick that. So we started to understand, you know, as soon as we say we're from the community, people are very risk averse, and they were like, oh, you can't do this if you thought about this, and there was like barrier after barrier after barrier, and we had to kind of gradually unpick that. And in hindsight, all of these things, so, you know, proudly bringing people into the space when we had no electrics and things like that, and, you know, using bunting to kind of make sure that people could access the space safely and things like that, are things that taught us about how to manage that risk, how to be brave, and how to push back on some of the standard ways of doing things, and to really think about like what is good enough and good value for our local community in a way that has real local impact, rather than going kind of for sort of real high spec developments. So this was one of the major moments where we really started to kind of grab hold of of what was happening on the street. So we'd crowdfunded for Union Corner, and we needed to remove the shop front, and we just had the World and his wife queuing up to tell us how complicated the removal of this shop front was going to be, to the point where we were like ready to give everyone their money back. We had a very dark December meeting in Union Corner, and we were like, we're not going to be able to manage this. We're going to have to give everyone their money back. But then we kind of regrouped, and we were like, actually, do you know what? We can bring some people around us. And in the end, we demolished the shop front on a Sunday very safely in about 45 minutes. And it was a real mental shift for us. And then we started to see the impact that Union Corner has. So we don't own Union Corner, we rent it. And actually, we realised quite quickly that although there's a load of amazing local impact that happens through it, the real beneficiary is the landowner. And that's what started us on our route of getting into how the economy works and all of that sort of stuff, which I would have never have thought like 3 or 4 years ago that I'd have like a set of favourite economists and stuff like this. But basically we saw like the strip club nearby closed down, the gentleman's club closed down, the landlord started to rent the buildings around Union Corner to better people, and we were like, who actually really benefits, and how could we do this in a different way? And so that's what led us to set up Nudge and bring those traces through. So this is an example of how we started to pull the traces through our work. These are the graphics that you saw on the front of Union Corner originally. They're now in the toilet in Union Corner. So we kind of play out all of these different things, and all these letters are from theatre posters on the street. So really kind of rooting what we do in the history of the street. So we moved on and we bought the Clipper in 2017. We bought it outright with a mixture of loans and a very scary moment. Both quit our jobs and we were like, right, if we're going to do this, we're going to go for it. It was a 24-hour pub and it had been standing empty. And there was a huge amount of work to do, but we started to get to grips with it, but quickly picked up those patterns again. So how volunteers were contributing to the space, bringing care to it. This is the urinal that we repurposed in the building. So it's like all those layers that make a community-owned building different and feel different, but also operate economically very differently as well. So for the Clipper, we did a share offer. So we've got 165 investors, and it was incredibly hard, but also incredibly important. We're a community benefit society, and what was at the heart of what we were doing was that collective ownership. And you know, it's still my favourite thing when people walk through the door and say, "Oh, I own a bit of this." So it's that real sense of local ownership. And then we repeated things like, so all the patterns on the front of the Clipper here are rooted in the history of the street and the architects of the street and things like that. And this is now in use as 2 flats, and on the ground floor is a cafe space and market space for people that are setting up their own businesses. And then again, we sort of, so these are the toilets again. There's definitely a theme of toilets with Nudge. So really capturing the story, all the volunteers that contributed to move that building on into its current life. And then on the street, so we always kind of look at how things play out on the street for local people, and it can be the smallest thing that has the biggest impact. So this is our Advent box, which is a tiny little box, and local people have keys and they can check it every day through December and see something different made by local people. We pop up on spaces where, you know, there's a lot of antisocial behaviour and people are saying that they don't feel safe. So as well as kind of looking for that sort of bigger economic impact in terms of securing the buildings, it's also really important that we start to shift how the spaces in the street feel, and that's where we listen all the time. So we don't do a lot of formal consultation. We're local, obviously, so we're around all the time. But we're always listening to the conversations and to the things that people are saying, and then drawing those into our work and sort of revisiting them in different ways. And this was last year at Union Corner, so just kind of having some reflective time after obviously a really tough year, and finding different ways to bring people out onto the street and starting to layer up on the street as well. So this was the first kind of more formal thing that we've done on the street, these canopies to create a space on that same bit of land. So just kind of all the time starting small, building up and really understanding what has most impact. So we've now moved on to the plot, which is this building. That's where I am now. I apologise if it's a bit loud. There's people randomly playing ping pong outside. So the plot is another tricky building that we took over in December 2019. Again, playing out a lot of the kind of learning from the Clipper and Union Corner, just having that confidence to go in and not worry too much about the condition, but thinking about what's possible, what gets people in, what gets people involved. So here we've filled the space with greenhouses and sheds, and it's all about taking sort of an allotment space that you need to get your business going. And at the back we've got the food court, which is Fabolani, and supporting sort of female BME entrepreneurs, but bringing a whole kind of new sort of opportunity for our community to experience as well. So this is the plot at Christmas time. And I guess one of the things that we've picked up is that quite often when you talk about ownership and the economy and things like that, it all gets very serious quite quickly. We like to kind of weave in a lot of joy into what we do, a lot of colour, and really find ways to sort of like draw those dots down really from those big sort of economic issues that play out into our community down to what could actually like make a real difference right now or next year in our area, and it's constantly reaching it back to that. And then at the end of last year we bought the Millennium Building as a joint venture. So what we're starting to realise is that because of the complex things that are holding these buildings empty, we're having to operate a bit like a private developer, but with ethics, but also kind of exploring different models and being open to that. So this building we've bought 50-50 with a private investor, and who brings a whole load of different skills to the table and supports us to make something that's really viable. And so, yeah, hopefully that's given you a quick sort of canter through the street. I guess what I would finish on is around thinking about that there's space for everyone. So as we grow, there's a real responsibility, I think, for community organisations that are doing this kind of thing about how you create the steps for other people that are coming up behind you or alongside you, how you remove the barriers for others. And that's the kind of thing that we're starting to do now that we've got plenty of buildings ourselves. It's like, actually, how do we maximise the local economic benefit for our community so that we create routes for other people to come in alongside us. So I hope that's given you a bit of a feel for what we're doing, and I look forward to chatting to everyone later.
Thank you so much, Hannah. I love those pictures because it looks like the sun is always shining on Union Street, and like you make it look like it was so easy. Like, I know what the plot looked like before you started ripping it apart to make it as beautiful as it is. You can see a bit of that with Union Street. So just that sheer kind of, I don't know what it is, like, that just makes you go in and go, yeah, we can do this. We're just going to pull that out and then just, you know, kind of clear it up and make it happen. and then just creating these really beautiful spaces. So thank you so much. And I think just Jacqueline, handing over to you to talk about how you did that with a particularly tricky building in a very lovely park, in a sort of neglected corner of the park. It'd be really good to hear from you now. Thank you.
Thank you, and hello everybody, it's lovely to be here. So I'm going to share my presentation. Bear with me a moment, see if I get this right. From beginning, yeah, there we go. Okay, so I am Jacqueline, and I'm one of the co-founders of a theatre company and arts organisation called Stiltskin, and I work with my husband. We've been working for 21 years, which a lot of people are usually quite astounded by, but it's a good relationship, we do well. So I've just got to work out how I move on. Okay, so we started out as a street theatre company, and we actually started out with a commission with the picture that you can see of the two black and white individuals. And that was a commission from Plymouth City Council, and that started us on our journey, really. With our street theatre, we wanted to bring theatre to the community, to interrupt people's everyday lives. And so they would be walking down the street and suddenly meet some very strange characters that kind of introduced themselves and chatted about bizarre things. And it was just about people sort of like engaging with the arts in very different places and enriching and enlivening places. In 2002, we had our first child, a little boy, and so that actually made us start to work more in our local area in Plymouth. So rather than touring theatre and touring around to different festivals and things, we started to really concentrate on working in schools and working on giant theatre and art projects. And so we engaged a lot of school children in theatre projects. We did a lot of residencies in schools, all in Plymouth, toured around schools in Plymouth. And this is a project where we had 100 children on a local beach doing a massive theatre show using huge puppets and things like that. And it was just engaging children in the arts, getting them excited. But this project was also about letting the people of Plymouth know that there are, I think there's about 7 beaches around Plymouth. People normally travel out of Plymouth to go to the beach, whereas actually we do have beaches here as well. So sort of just letting people know that what Plymouth actually has to offer. And then we became artistic directors for some very big parades. This was the Lord Mayor's Day parade, and we were the artistic directors for the children's side of it. So we worked with 300 children for each parade. The secondary school children, young people, they made these giant puppets, and then the primary school children made their costumes and masks, and we brought everybody together, and it's a huge celebration of our community. And all of the things that we created were based around the heritage of Plymouth. So children actually got the story about what we were, the heritage, as well as being part of the celebration. And we also created some big sort of giant parades for the Christmas show, Christmas lantern parades. These started out with 80 children to begin with, and our final parade that we did in 2014 had over 1,000 people actually in the parade. So it was something that we really built up, and a really fantastic celebration of Plymouth, really, and of the people within the city. And there you go, there's the polar bear, you can see him there, that's the lantern parade coming through the Drake Circus. You can see how fantastic it was. And inside these giant structures here are actually young people that were 12-year-old people, and they were actually walking around with these giant puppets. So they quite spectacular. And we had other young people going up to them and saying, there's actually a kid in there. Whoa, you know, so it was really very, very empowering for those young people to be doing something like this. In 2014, we sort of came across this building in Devonport Park. It's a mustard gas decontamination unit. That's what it was built as in 1941. And there were 6 of them across Plymouth, and the others have been demolished. This was meant to be demolished in the 1980s, but it was Devon Council at the time that actually demolished the wrong building. They took down a very nice Victorian tennis court building and left this one. And we were looking for a home because we travelled around a lot, travelled around the schools. When we were doing the giant structures, we found ourselves trying to find space, and the structures were getting bigger. We were making more of them. So we were looking for a home, and we wanted somewhere that had a garden. And this building is based in a corner that had been forgotten about, really, in Devonport Park, which is one of the oldest, well, I think it is the oldest parks in Plymouth. It's a Victorian park. It's all very lovely, and it had a massive regeneration about 8 years ago, but this corner was forgotten. And so this building was locked up for 4 years. And as you can see, sort of falling apart, really. And it was used around the back area. It was used by drug addicts to go back there to do what they needed to do, but it's also a human toilet, things like that. So it wasn't very pleasant, but we had a bit of a vision when we found it. This is what it looked like inside. You can see our giant structures there, but it was just a big open space that had been stripped out by the previous leaseholders, who were the model railway enthusiasts. And when we walked in, we just immediately recognised that we could do something quite exciting with the building, and started to think about how we could engage the community with the building, especially children and young people, how we could use the space as a big workshop area, but also a space where children could engage in drama activities. And so we were given the building as on lease by the council. We had to go through quite a lot of legal jargon that we had no idea what it meant. We didn't understand half the lease, but a lot of emails that had very unusual language in it that we had no idea what they were talking about. But we wanted to just get on and do it, so we did, and just sort of like kind of ignored what they were saying in a way, because just sort of like had to look up lots of things. But eventually we managed to lease the building, and you can see it's a bit grubby, but this is what it looks like today. So we had our first crowdfunding campaign, and this is where we realized that we were onto something that people could really understand the vision that we had. So when we sent out the crowdfunding campaign, we were overwhelmed by how people reacted, and we managed to raise, I think it was within 2 weeks, we managed to raise over our £7,000 goal. We did have this city change fund that supported the crowdfunding as well. It's where the city give half of their funding if you get to a certain percentage, certain amount. I think it's 25% within a few days. So we managed to get there, and so that crowdfunding actually helped to support putting in the carpet, so that when children did workshops, they weren't rolling around on a concrete floor, and we put in all the blacks, and it just created such a fantastic space. Really, really exciting. I forgot to say that this is a children's theatre, so it's very, very small, but absolutely ideal for children. It had, when we first moved in, it had no running water and no toilets. So we had a portaloo that used to sit out the front here. And every day it was like camping. We had to bring in our water, take our washing up home. So for 4 years, our house was full of washing up and water cans and all sorts of things. But being as tenacious as we were, we just kept going. This is our portaloo, but as you can see, we experienced some very interesting times when we had things like our portaloo was actually set on fire. There were quite a few times when it was pushed over, so you can see there's a big chain around this one, even though this one was set on fire. Again, our community kind of worked with us, and we raised £800 to replace the portaloo. So, you know, it's really fantastic to have all that community support. And then we received Social Enterprise Investment Fund to start to develop the facade really of the building, to sort of show to everybody that it wasn't a toilet. And there were things happening in this building, wonderful things happening, magical things happening, where children from as young as 6 months old actually came to watch theatre shows, came to festivals, young children came to do workshops. And so we began to develop the front, and we also built, you can just see in the corner there, we built toilets, and we dug a huge trench right across the park to bring in the water, which was quite interesting. And this is what the building looks like today from the outside. So we're feel quite excited that we've actually managed to rejuvenate this very tired, sad corner of the park into something quite lovely and very much loved by ourselves and hopefully our community. I believe they do love it. So we do lots of workshops in there for young children. You can see these guys on the right, they're actually doing a shadow puppet play. These guys have got their masks on. We run and we do lots of shows ourselves, it's myself and my partner. And we run things like family raves, where we have tiny children coming in and raving with their parents. They're great fun. And we also have a nod to the heritage of the building. So we run a World War II project every year with schools. We evacuate schools to the building, and they come dressed in all of their World War II things, and they do lots of activities to do with the building. We use the park as well, so it's one of the things that we really are quite up on, is using our space outside, getting children outside, and especially at this moment in time, rewilding children, getting children to be out in all sorts of weather, so come rain or shine, we're out there. And we do festivals for children, and we work with children and families from a tiny age. Our youngest child we've had in the theatre has been 4 days old, which is really quite thrilling actually. And we work right the way through to young people. We have a young people's board, and they get the opportunity to use the theatre twice a year and to put something on that they feel is relevant for their peers, and they actually organise those events and run them. With COVID, we aren't allowed to use the building at the moment. We haven't been able to use the inside the building since last March the 17th. We completely closed down. So we had to kind of come up with a new idea of how to use our space. So we worked with the council to license the outside area. So with the council, usually if you want to use the parks, we have to apply every time we want to use the park for a different event. But by talking to the council, explaining what we needed to do, they agreed if we licensed the outside area, then we could use that area when we needed to. We do have an alcohol license as well, so we can use that area if we need to for comedy clubs and things like that. But in order to sort of like get our audience in, we needed to create an auditorium that was covered. So we came up with the idea of using these little teepees. So these teepees, a family can sit inside a teepee. I did have a photo of a family inside a teepee, but I've gone on. I don't have to get back to. You might come across it in a minute. But by doing that as well, we're also able to open up the site for touring companies. So last summer, there were touring companies were their income was totally devastated because they couldn't tour into theatre spaces. But by enabling them to use this space, then we were enabling theatre to continue, really. So a lot of theatres were closed down, but we just kept going throughout the summer, and allowed people to come in, and the community were absolutely delighted to be able to come and watch theatre shows and just to have a little bit of sort of like normality and get away from screens. So that was really special. We around the back, this is the area that I said before that was used by the drug users. It was it's got this beautiful little copse of very old trees that we really wanted to celebrate. And so we've started to create a community art garden out here. And the council have given us the permission to use this space when we need to, and to plant what we want to plant in it to just enhance it. And I think the council have realised that by allowing us to do this, allowing us to create something for the community, we're rejuvenating the space, we're putting something back into it, putting pride into the community. And also it's a space where there's a lot of, because we're in Devonport, it's one of the poorest communities in Plymouth. It's a space where people who don't have gardens, they can come here and feel safe, and experience the park in a different way to, the park has got, it's a wonderful park and it's got a children's playground, but by creating a community art garden, it's just a different look at how you can use a green space. So this is the start of it, and we've planted a 40-metre long fedge, which is a growing willow hedge, and it took us twice the time to plant this that it would normally, because it's right on the pathway. So we spent a great deal of time talking to people as they went past, and some very incredible conversations. We found out lots of history of people. We had discussions with people who said, oh, another fence, but then when they discovered why and how this, although
we lost Jacqueline there.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a shame. Just getting into the bit about the fedge. Sounds really great. Well, maybe we'll get her back in a moment. I think for now, I mean, there's some great examples there of people working within, beyond and against the state. A couple of, we're almost on time, running a little bit over. I mean, a couple of questions maybe, Frances, I can go with. Clarifications. I suppose something that came out quite a lot in the chat, and this is probably a question for everybody, and Victoria touched on the idea of a judicial review. I mean, of any of our speakers, I mean, are there any particular laws and rules or legal instruments that you found particularly useful that you've been able to make use of? And just sort of raise a hand or wave or jump in.
You are asking me? No, it's not. It's just what you need to find is normally when it's a development coming to do this, they come and they don't expect that the community are going to pose such a resistance, right? So you have to read through the lines, with something that I have learned to do a long time ago, just because in law there is I don't have any background in law, but I have learned a lot, and it's like sometimes there's loopholes in the law that they say something, but they mean some, they say, oh, but I meant to say this, yeah, but I didn't say. So this is the things that you can challenge, and I can speak to any of you. I can leave my number in the individual basis that I can, if I could help, I wanted to help, because I wish when we started someone was there to just give me a hand, and we just learned from scratch, and it was extremely difficult. But there is this kind of the judicial review, Nirusham, sorry if I don't pronounce it well, and to everybody that normally when there's a lack of consultation, a lack of inclusion, a lack of all the things that all of you have described, it is a room for a judicial review. But bringing a judicial review with the community is going to be successful, because what happened is in judicial review, they use examples of different examples of the community, and you can use our example, how the developer did not consultate whatsoever when it comes to demolish this building with the community, and the council did everything in their power. Like you say, you just put this petition and they was never put it online. What we learned to do was like we did the petition or the consultation ourselves, because we consulted ourselves. We became our own developer, if you want to put it that way. And we consulted the community, and we sent this, and or the objection, or most of the time the objection, we give them to the council because they have to upload it into the system. When we are trying to upload it, the page was always let down. So what we did, we handed him, give me your name. I just handed him, can you just put this? And we try, we fax, we did everything, and we got them in how do you call them? We have them basically. So having all these, and then he said yes, and also go to the council and do like talk to the councillors that are your friends, that you can sympathize with your cause, and you can do all these motions inside the council supporting you, right? All these things I have learned through the years, and you have like 3-4 minutes or 5 minutes to speak about it. But you will find when you go to these forums, there is more people sympathizing with everything that we do than anything else. So that's how the strength start to grow and to grow. But don't be afraid to challenge them, and don't have any illusion that because you can sit with them on the same table, what you wanted to do or achieve is the same things that they wanted to do. I don't think that is the case. They wanted to have you because they think, oh my God, having them here, it's going to be less trouble. Always go with a pinch of salt with them, because they're never going to be straightforward, because the only aim is for them to make money and to destroy the communities. In our case, as the council has sold a big plot of land under value, and you name it, because I just wanted to hear from everybody as well. But it's all the things that we have learned, and we have an amazing QC, we have an amazing solicitors. So people who sympathize with your cause and understand it, that is very important. When you go and see a solicitor, and if you see understand what you want to say, that is a click. If you have to explain over and over and over, that's not the one, because we did this. And I will be, because all the things that when you talk about that the council is a conflict of interest, it's always a conflict of interest. And these things that you can flag out, you can ask for a lot of information under the Freedom Information Act. You can do that. There is a lot of organization like Corporate Watch. You can approach as well, and they will be able to dig a lot of information for you guys. So we learn all this ourselves, and that's why perhaps it's been taking us so long. But I do believe it took the time that needed to take for everybody to realize that this is wrong, and things are changing at the moment. And listen to all the inspiring stories from every single one of you is made me wanted to fight even harder, and just to get to know you all is amazing that you managed to buy a plot of land, something that we've been trying so hard to do it, and we're not there yet. But anyway, we will get to that stage with bringing these communities together and allies, and we're here to support each of you, and then to learn from all of your experience. That is amazing.
That's really great, Victoria. Thank you so much. We've really got the whole spectrum really here of people, one end really standing against the state and making things happen. the other way of, working really well with local councils, and all of that seems to happen. There was another question really that came through, particularly when Hannah was speaking. I mean, there was an interest in how how you've managed to work with the council, and to what extent the council managed to work with yourselves, or has it been much more antagonism, like Victoria's experience?
I guess it has been mixed. So Plymouth's a cooperative council, and so we were able to take advantage of some of the funds that Jackie mentioned. And so, yeah, the Social Enterprise Investment Fund, for example, and the council being able to pledge on crowdfunder, those kind of things. So we managed to get a loan from the housing loan facility from the council to buy the clipper, for example. So where there's like formal routes, we've had quite a lot of success. I think what's taking a lot more time is to sort of build that trusting relationship, and also to, I think for us, what we're realising is how we present ourselves to the council and to others. So you get this slight flicker when you say you're a community business. It's kind of, the sense that you're not quite professional, that you're a bit alternative and all of this kind of thing. And so actually sort of presenting ourselves as a landowner and expecting to have that relationship with economic development as a small house builder would be, for example. It's kind of, that shift is just starting to happen now. So it's taken quite a long time. I think, it's interesting, isn't it? Because we're all kind of working on buildings and spaces that no one wanted and no one was really interested in, and so you start to put your energy in it, and then the world and his wife's got an opinion on it, and how to do things and stuff, and we've certainly experienced that. There's loads of sort of regeneration happening around the outside of Union Street, but there hasn't really been the impact here. So it's been tricky to kind of challenge that, but then also know that we need to approach the council for support, not so much financial support, but strategic support is our challenge. But it's definitely getting there, and some of the work that's happening at the moment around the Resurgam plan, which the council's published after COVID, is really supportive to help us to get things going.
Great, thanks, Hannah. Yeah, a mixed picture, but partly the joys of being a social enterprise city. Plug for the social enterprise network there. Did any of our other speakers want to come on that? Just sort of got a few other people, or are we happy to move on?
I'm just going to make a point on the legal instruments. Then what I would say is it depends on what position you're in. I think lots of the community groups and community don't have that expertise to be able to say, look, this is where the problem lies, this is where we're looking. Because, planning law and all the policies and procedures from local authorities in the state is quite complicated if you don't know where you're looking. So I would say if you have it, great. I think that is a definite asset. But if you don't, I think don't worry. Part of the council's duty to you is to provide all that information and how they came about that decision and anything to do with spaces. I think what we found really useful is we always ask them for an equality impact assessment. They always struggle to get to us that in time, because they must be just scrambling to put one together to give to us. I would always ask for that, even if it's not as relevant to your piece of land or your project or your community space. I would always ask for that, because they'll look at the implications for different communities. The other thing I will always ask for is the freedom of information request. Always put that in. Ask for minutes, ask for what they talked about, ask the consultation period, get as much information as you can from the council, who have a legal duty to provide that to you. So you know exactly where you are and how they came about to that decision. So use those two, which is quite easy to do, and anybody can do it. All you have to do is write to the data protection team at Cardiff Council with some questions, and depending on the relevance of your project or campaign or space, and find out exactly what's happening behind the scenes. And then, yeah, those are tools for you to use later on when you build relationships with those in the council who are making those decisions. But yeah, those were my two tips, I guess.
Thanks, Nurashan. That's really great. Some really practical tips there. Francis, I guess we might move on. We missed the end of Jacqueline's bit, which we want to hear, but maybe we'll pick that up in the Q&A.
Yeah, so what we wanted to do was just break you out into breakout rooms for sort of 15 minutes or so. They'll all be facilitated. And the idea is that you can just kind of have a conversation between yourselves and reflect on what you've heard and kind of come back with a few questions that Ed and I will sort of look at and then put to the speakers in the last sort of 10, 15 minutes. So we get a really good sense of all the different kind of bits of information that are in their heads that we want to get out. So I think Ruby's going to break everybody into breakout rooms, and facilitators, please don't forget to record and end record, and we'll see you on the other side.
Oh, still going on. Okay, I think that's most of us now. Welcome back, and I hope you had a good conversation. And nice to meet a few people in your rooms. And some really great questions come out of that. And I suppose the first one, the sort of theme that came out to me, was an idea of, I suppose, accountability. And I was particularly struck by the work of Hannah and the work that Jacqueline was just about to get on to with their veg. The process of being out there and doing something in the street and talking to people seems to be a really important part of accountability and engagement with communities, and gives a really rich representative voice, adding something really qualitative to our possibly sort of quite numeric, quantitative democratic system. I suppose I'm interested from our speakers, how can we make that bigger? How can we grow that and make that a bit more formal? Don't want to come in there. I might pick on Hannah and Jacqueline.
I don't know about more formal, but I did say in our session about how you can make it more visible and more valued. So we've had people kind of saying, well, how, you know, the plot is now fully let. So 17 businesses in here, and we've done that through COVID, and people have said, well, how have you managed that? And it's all through those trusted relationships and those networks, and understanding other people's journeys and where they are and stuff, and that's not very visible. And so I think there's something about how we can value that and present it in a way that it's recognized, because you know, when people choose not to go with a community business and choose to go with a private developer, for example, it's about managing risk, isn't it? And actually that accountability and being able to demonstrate that network and that local accountability manages the risk in a completely different way. But it's really hard to kind of explain and to assess the value of it.
Thank you. Now other speakers want to come in there.
Yeah, I think for us, because actually having a building, sometimes that can be a barrier as well. And so we were this little children's theatre in a park, and lots of the park users actually had no idea really what we did, because they didn't come into the building. And this is going to be a weird statement, but COVID has actually been beneficial to us, because it meant that we had to come outside. And so then our very local community, the park users, they actually saw the people that came to see the shows. They were able to see the shows, so they were able to actually engage in what we did in a much wider, broader sense. And now they are very much more supportive of what we do, because they understand it. It's there, it's been in front of them, and so they can engage it in many different ways. And just by when we were planting the veg, the amount of people that we did speak to were people that would probably never have, if we were stood outside the theatre, they wouldn't have engaged with us on a normal everyday day. But because we were doing something and we were creating something and it was for them, they began to engage with us more. So I think it's just being out there and being open is really, really important, and just letting the wider community know what is happening and that they are part of it.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Any else come in there? Or Francis, have you got a question for us?
Yeah, I think it's related, and I think a lot of responsibility is put on community-led initiatives that aren't put on local authorities, which are really fundamentally important, and often why people are involved in community-led stuff for the, you know, in the first place. But I think the question about governance, and also kind of one of the questions that came up, is how do you manage people, like different aims that people have, their interests and their needs and also their fears? You know, it feels like a lot to shoulder, but actually that is at the essence of what the new world that we're trying to create. And Vicky, I just wondered if you wanted to start off with that, because I'm just thinking about how the issue of conflict has come up with Latin Village.
Yeah, sorry, say that again.
Sorry, I was a bit involved, but just kind of how do you manage different, so if you're doing something that's community led, how do you manage all the different aims and interests and the needs and the fears that different people have?
I think that's one of the questions as well in our group. It's very hard. It's very hard. And again, someone asked us, is it really high price to pay? Yes, it is in many ways, because you're just humans. You're just a human like everybody else. The only thing you want the best for everybody, and then again, like not everybody sometimes are looking for the same aim, you know, and that has been extremely difficult. The thing is, don't lose the focus for the wider community. It has been extremely. I think it's lessons. The life always taught me in a way that to be resilient, to respect the ideas of others, even if they don't have the same ideas as you that you have, and then to be inclusive. A lot of things that I never thought I was gonna, you know, that I will be made of in many ways, and for our community, just having some time to put the community on your shoulders, literally, to be able to carry on pushing and say, it's worth doing this, we need to stick together, despite the odds, despite the difficulties, despite the terrible times. I think one of the things what COVID told us, I think to everybody in general, is how to be resilient, and we mustn't give up, because giving up is not an option. And for us, giving up is never, for me, as Colombian, as a refugee in Colombia, giving up is not an option. So I came here thinking giving up is not an option. I can't give up now, you know. So I think it's this, and of course, managing different expectations is to talk to people, is learn the skills, and it's not something that you go to university and learn. I think you just learn as you go along every single day, and you learn like how to talk to different groups, because some people are pro-developers, some are against it, some people that want this, they got their own personal interest. But remember what is your goal, and it's to do the community, and that you started somewhere and you need to make a change and carry on with what you believe, and you will see later on that you get the rewards are going to be extremely great. And this is what we have done. It has been, I think our campaign has had everything that everybody have described. It has been extremely difficult, and I know it sounds like it's not, because we can summarize this maybe in 2 hours, but you have no idea, or well, all of you have ideas of the hardship that has been involved, but we're here to stay anyway, like I say, and yeah, we're still here standing.
Thank you, Vicky. Nirishan, what's your reflections on kind of managing that with your work in Butte Town?
It's a tricky question to answer. I mean, the community is always conflicted about everything, and that's natural. You're never going to get everybody on the same page. Even our local councillor was completely against the plans of one of the things we were objecting to. He was like, no, I want this social housing, blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, I think what we try to do is make sure we spoke to leaders of important institutions in the community. So we spoke to the priest in the local church, we spoke to the imam in the local mosque, a leader of a community organization, others who are quite prominent individuals. You know, just set up a one-to-one call with them and explain like what we're talking about, so they understand it. Because you know, once you get those people on board, it's much easier for others to follow through. But then there'll be challenges where other people disagree completely. Every time we come across a conflicting relationship, we obviously respect that. But I think in terms of building your power, you have to bring an alliance together, and that only works when you work with institutions. We try not to focus on one person or two people who might bring that conflicting view and try to get them on board, but rather we look at the bigger picture and try to manage those relationships. Because you know, if we get local institutions on board with us, it's very difficult for any community member just to come up and oppose it, because they'll be trying to oppose institutions that have been there a long time. So that's what we try and do, try and always aim for an institution, look at the person we want to make a connection with. So typically someone who's in charge saying, oh look, now this is what we're trying to do, how do you think this will reflect the community? And you know, if they like the idea, we know we're doing something right. If they don't, that's when we have that wider discussion and then take it from there.
Thank you. Yeah, that's really helpful. And I didn't say, but obviously you use community organising principles, and also Viviana in Latin Village, you've been doing the same, which I think is something we've not really covered today, but is something that's really important to bear in mind. Ed, did you want to hand over to you for a final question?
Sorry, I'll mute myself. Yeah, I mean, really building on that, because this stuff, you know, it's kind of hard, isn't it? You know, cases really depend on the energy of people who are driving these projects that we've seen from our speakers. I suppose what could be done, you know, to make this kind of work easier? I mean, what is it that we can do? Dreaming a bit in the state of us. What would be the one or the two things, my speakers, that we might do that would, you know, make this easier for everybody? Oh, stunned into silence by that one.
Could you repeat that? I was answering a question for an email.
No problem. I suppose, you know, I think we've heard some amazing stories here, but you know, of some amazing works being achieved. None of it's been easier. I suppose, you know, the question that's come from the group is like, well, what can we do to make this a bit easier for everybody? What are the things that we need to change? Hannah.
Okay, I'll go. So we're really interested in our collective strength as community businesses. So I think quite often you can look outside for the solution, but actually, if you looked across the country at how much land is owned by community businesses, whether we can act as guarantors for each other, you know, how can we build our collective strength? I think there's a lot more that we could do around that. Someone was saying the other day that if you haven't sort of maxed out your lending opportunities against your building as a community business, you're not sweating your asset. And quite often we're taught as community organisations to pay everything back and to you know, do that as quickly and as risk averse as possible. And I think if we pull together nationally in those kind of ways, I think there could be some really exciting things that happen.
Niroshan.
Yeah, I mean, can I say a friendly council that listens to everybody at the community? I think that's a vision that we'll never get to. But I think that the idea is having officers in councils that you have a direct relationship with. I think that will go a long way for communities to be able to stand up for themselves. If you know who the person to contact, I think before anything it gets anywhere, as long as you have that relationship, it'll go a long way in doing that. I think the other things that will help is, I think, giving space, especially for organizations, groups, and movement, the chance to make those mistakes and flourish and grow on their own. I think there's a lot of value in this coming organically within communities. If we try and do everything to them and give all this knowledge and information, I think you'll lose that interest a lot. And, you know, it's not something that people actually really care about. Rather, you've just been thrown down all these things, but let them, I think any group that comes, let them grow, support from different organizations that can give that support and knowledge, easy access, but rather let them grow organically. I think let movements develop themselves, realize what spaces they want to keep, what they're actually passionate about, and what their community stands for. I think you have to go through that journey on your own. No one else, I think, can do it for you. So giving them that space, I think, will go a long way in helping challenge the unfair power in certain areas. Because, you know, what developers don't want to see is like organizations come and complain to them, because they see that all the time. But if they see people, lots of people in that area coming together to complain, that's much more powerful than anything else.
Thank you, Shan. I mean, yeah, there's been lots of comments in the breakouts and in the chat around, you know, independent politics and independent politicians and municipalist platforms. I'm conscious that we've probably got elections coming up soon, and it's really interesting how people from the community can sort of work within and occupy a state in that way. And we'll certainly be picking up that much more in the plenary. And sort of ideas of, you know, citizen action networks and things like that when we hear from our colleagues in Barcelona. So I think, Frances, we're running out of time. I'm going to hand it back to you.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. So yeah, we want to finish on time, respect everybody's time, but I just wanted to say a massive thank you to everybody. I really enjoyed that. These hours and a half just like whizzed by. And it's been so great having you all together in the room and to hear from everybody and our speakers. And thank you to our facilitators as well, to Tom and Ruby and Amy in the background, and Gareth and Michelle and Nick. And so I'll hand back to you, Ed, for news of next week's session. But yeah, thank you all very, very much.
Yes, thank you all again. And do not forget, today is the second session of our 4 sessions, where we'll be back next week at the same time, the same place, on the 4th of May. May the 4th be with you. To explore the state of resilience. How are people building community power and economic democracy around making and production, and tackling the big old issues of climate change and environmental breakdown. We will have another 4 fantastic speakers: Jane Hembrow and Suzanne Moore from Plymouth Scrap Store, Mona Bani from the Bay Garden Project, our very own Hannah Harris from Plymouth Culture, and dialing in all the way from Indonesia, we have Thomas Diaz, founder of Fab Lab Barcelona and the International Fab City Movement. We really, really do hope you can join us. We're building numbers every time and a movement towards the state of us. We look forward to seeing you next week. I think that's bye from me. Goodbye.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.